Hi everyone.
This year, we are reflecting on the theme Food Safety Science in Action. It is a theme that goes beyond the theory and policy. It reminds us that science is not just a concept confined to laboratories, it is alive in our kitchens, farms, factories, classrooms, and marketplaces. It is active in how we monitor, test, manage, and communicate risk, and ultimately how we keep our food safe for everyone. At Food Maestro, we believe that science must serve people. That is why we focus on turning complex food safety principles into practical, accessible knowledge that helps food businesses grow responsibly and keep consumers safe. From our training programs, through the guidance we provide, to our partnerships with organizations, regulators, and entrepreneurs, we've seen how capacity building rooted in science can transform not just practices, but their mindset. This town hall is our contribution to that transformation, a space to listen, learn, and lead. We are privileged to be joined by a dynamic panel of experts who bring experience in food allergy management, water hygiene, food regulation, consumer safety, and innovation. They will help us explore how science is currently shaping and should continue to shape safe food system in Nigeria and around the world. Whether you are a student here, a startup business owner, a regulator, a food safety professional, a researcher, or a concerned consumer, your presence here shows that food safety is everyone's business. And I am grateful to each of you for showing up. So thank you once more for being part of this important conversation. Welcome, and let's have a great section ahead. You're welcome once more.
Thank you very much, Ms. Immaculate, for that opening remark. We're elated to be here, and I'm sure we have others are elated to be here as well. And we are set for an interesting time. Okay, so our next point is our panel discussion, where we'll be talking about the actual theme of the day on World Food Safety, which is World Food Safety Day, Science in Action. Already, we know that food safety is a critical issue that affects us all, and we know that science plays a vital role in ensuring food safety. However, from farm to table, we see that science-based solutions can help prevent contamination. And we can also see that today and in the future, we'll be discussing and talking about latest developments in food safety science, sharing best practices, and exploring ways to implement science-based solutions in the food industry. Now, our panelists today are experts in food safety, and they'll be sharing their insights and experiences. Okay, so we'll also have the opportunity, because it is a town hall meeting, we'll also have the opportunity, to ask questions and to discuss other specific topics that are related to food safety. I want to encourage everyone on this call to participate actively in this discussion. You can ask questions, you can engage the panelists, you can share your thoughts. Your input is very valuable, and we are excited to hear your perspectives as well and your thoughts on food safety. Now, to get started, our first speaker today will be no other person than Mr. Jerry Chechet Kahu. Please, we can go to the chat box and just give him a round of applause as a way of welcoming him. We can't clap, but we can't clap with our palms, but we can virtually do something in the chat box to welcome him and every of our panelists. So Mr. Jerry Chechet Kahu is a researcher. I'm sorry, sir, if I don't get to pronounce your name well, please kindly bear with me. He's a researcher in food allergen management, and he'll be discussing scientific strategies for identifying managing and labeling food allergens, and how they contribute to safer food systems for vulnerable populations. Mr. Jerry Chechet, you have the floor now. Thank you very much for having us.
Um, thank you very much for your introduction. And I'm really happy to be here. Although this is a town meeting, so I wasn't able to make some slides maybe to show up, but I understand that we just have to maybe discuss. And so that's why I make some slides. Yeah. So it would be nice to have some visuals as well, but it's still fine. So I think it's more engaging. So we have more people to ask questions, to talk about issues. So just wanted to make it simple. So basically, today I'll be covering some scientific strategies for identifying, managing, and labeling food allergens and how they contribute to a safer food systems for vulnerable population. But before I start, I might just give a brief introduction about myself and what I do. I as the moderator mentioned, my name is Jerry Kahu. I'm a researcher at the Food Allergy Research and Resource Program at the University of Nebraska Lincoln in the US. And I also work with NAVDAC. I've, I've worked with them for a while too. Yeah, so but currently I do some research on tree nut allergens. I'm trying to develop a method for analyzing and quantifying tree nut allergens in processed food. Yeah, so um, I'm happy to be here really, and I'm excited to talk about a topic that affects millions of people around the world, especially the most vulnerable among us. Food allergens is quite complicated because unlike other food safety components, when you look at microorganisms, you look at some other food contaminants, allergies are quite tricky. Yeah, but let's start with a quick reality check. Food allergies are not just an inconvenience. They, with food allergy, most people affected are very, very cautious in looking at food labels. Um, Always checking what they eat. They have to read the labels. They have to read about the ingredients. They have to understand those things. So it's an inconvenience to them, but it's not just that inconvenience. It can be very life threatening. So a small amount of an allergen can trigger severe reactions, which can be as mild as itching, hives, coughing, swelling of the throat, and all such, and can also be very severe and fatal, like anaphylaxis, which we can see experience in children, even those within the age group of, let's say, 18 to 40, and the elderly. So it goes around and mostly also affect those that are immunocompromised. So this makes allergy a public health issue and a public health priority, not just a food industry concern. Because sometimes people just perceive food allergy as, oh, this is just in the food industry because the allergens are in food and this is what. But it's a big public health priority, especially here in the US. I know in certain part of the world they are still trying to come up with the prevalence data to understand how severe or how vast this allergy affects the population. Yeah, but in the US, I know currently there's a lot of data regarding that. And there's a statistics that there are about 30,000 emergency room visits due to food allergy in the US. That's a huge number. And according to that statistics as well, about 10% of the US population are affected by food allergy. And if you look at the population of the US, it's about 300 million, over 300 million people. So you're talking about almost 30 million people, which is huge. And in Nigeria, although we we have not seen a specific data on that, but I know there's a misconception that people say food allergy doesn't really affect the black man. That's not true. I think there are some other issues that might be related to us not getting prevalence data, maybe issues of testing and self-reporting and other clinical diagnosis. So I think these are some of the issues that we don't have specific data that can be traceable to get the prevalence of people suffering on food allergy in Nigeria. So, but I think that's the area we also need to do more in the country because there are a lot of people that experience that, but sometimes we don't really diagnose and know that's the issue. So we might attribute them to other things. Yeah. So in the context of what we're looking through today, so how do we make our food system safer? So today I'm going to be breaking down my discussion on three major components as the topic was stated: identification, management, and also labeling. These are three key areas where we as food allergen experts need to focus on, or in general, let's say food safety experts. Yeah. So the first one, identification, that's the first line of defense when it comes to food allergy. The first thing when we deal with something like allergens is to know what we're dealing with, right? We can't tackle an issue without knowing exactly what the problem is. Right. Then I think currently we have a lot of food allergens. There are over 160 food allergens that are there all around the world. Yeah, we have a lot of foods. We have regular foods we eat. We have novel foods that are coming and that people are working on to understand if these new foods can be allergenic. We have GMOs that are also coming that people are looking at. Oh, they have allergenic traits and all such. So basically, as I was saying, we have a lot of food allergens all around the world, but there are certain every country regulates some particular set of food, which might be due to the rate of consumption and some other factors. Yeah, so I don't know. Sorry, let me just apologize. I will be talking in the aspect of the US as well as the aspect of Nigeria because most of my research has been here in the US, so I can't really just separate that. Yeah, so I will be bringing in both contexts of the US and also what we have in Nigeria as well. So, like in the US, the FDA regulates or requires labeling of nine major food allergens. So I'm sure we are aware of most of the food allergens we have, like milk, egg, um, tree nuts, peanut, soybean, wheat, fish, and the rest. Yeah. So, but every country have some specific list they do, but most countries around the world do have the major allergens that I just mentioned, right? And some others have some additional ones. Like in Nigeria, they also regulate the same um, food sources as regulated in the US, which I mentioned. But in addition, have some other components. I won't call them food really, but sulfite. It's an allergen that some other countries also regulate. Yeah, so Nigeria as well regulate sulfite as an allergen. Yeah, so these are basically what we look at. So the way we look at allergens we need to know that allergens are proteins. The sources are what we eat, which might contain different food biomolecules from your carbohydrates to your fats and the rest. But the component that is responsible for the allergic reaction are the protein aspects of that food. So basically, if you have carbohydrates, they are not responsible for any allergic reaction and the rest. So when we look at these proteins, now I'm going to look at, okay, how do we then identify, since we understand what these allergens are, we know that these allergens are proteins. So for identification, we need to know, okay, what ways can we really identify our allergens? So basically, the first one I always look at are analytical testing methods because That's basically what we can do to test and confirm, oh, this food contains this protein or contains this allergen. Okay. Yeah. So there are many techniques that are being used for allergen detection or quantification in the as the case may be. Yeah, so but particularly we look at the first ones, things like amino acids, the polymerase chain reactions, and also mass spectrometry. So, but for amino acids, they are the mostly used method that we currently have that are used around the world. These might be influenced by factors like cost and some other things, yeah, and easy maybe accessibility, the ease to use and the rest. So the major one people look at when it comes to amino acids are our ELISA, which is the enzyme linked immunosorbent assay, and we also perform things like lateral flow devices for allergen testing. So these are methods that are available that uh, they are really developed based on antibody antigen reaction. So that's why we call them amino acids. So they are really specific. They are accurate as well, but they sometimes do have some limitations, and those limitations are very crucial, especially in the context of the food industry. A lot of food people are trying to develop strategies to make or formulate different food products. They use different type of processing methods, ranging from thermal processing to ultrasonic processing, and a lot of uh, different types of processing. So these processing methods usually have an effect on when it comes to detection, because okay, the what we're looking at as allergens are proteins, and we know that proteins can sometimes be affected based on different factors, maybe by them being denatured. And when these proteins get denatured, they tend to lose their structural formulation. And when that happens, most of these amino acids that are being created or are being developed, let me say, to test conformational epitopes in these proteins, they tend not to work. So you end up having false negative results. And these are some of the limitations we look at when it comes to testing using amino acids. So those limitations are huge, but nonetheless, if a method is an ELISA method or an amino acid method is being developed in the context of having those limitations being used as components when they were being developed, it you might help to solve this problem. But it's quite tricky because antibody antigen reactions are not really easy when you come to things like thermal processing, when you use heat in your production. Then some other type of analysis or that are used for identification are also PCR, which are the polymerase chain reaction. This basically involves DNA. So not really protein. Yeah, so what they check it's the DNA where if you look at how proteins are being produced in any food complex, any system, biological complex, you have the central dogma from your DNA down to your mRNA, then they get transcribed to your mRNA, then translated to your proteins. So there's a central dogma that does that. And so the PCR can also test for DNA fragments, especially when the proteins in those food have been kind of maybe they're limited or they are eliminated in a way. So you can use PCR to detect DNA fragments that can be used to understand if these allergenic components are there. Because basically the allergens, even though they're proteins, what we want to identify in general is the food source. Yeah, so if the food source is coming from milk, and we know milk has a lot of proteins, and they also have some carbohydrates like lactose. But what we are interested at the proteins, but at the end, we just want to know that the food source is being added to that food. Because if the food source is added, probably, or most likely, the proteins are also there, present. So then the trending technique that a lot of scientists are you developing methods is for mass spectrometry. And like as I told you earlier, for me, I'm currently developing a multi-target mass spectrometric method for the quantification of tree nut allergens in processed food. And this is really like an intense and well do work, but it's mass spectrometry offers a lot to the food industry, to the food safety space, because with mass spectrometry, you're just thinking about the mass and charge, right? Mass to charge ratio. So it's really accurate. It's sensitive. It can be specific as well, and it's highly robust. When I look at robustness, that's what mass spectrometry has over our amino acids, because when you look at robustness, we look at, okay, can this thing detect food in a complex food matrix? If you have a certain allergen in a complex food matrix, can it detect that? If you have a certain allergen that has undergone a certain processing, maybe thermal processing, and it has high temperatures are being used, proteins are denatured, can it detect that? So that's what mass spectrometry offer. So these are analytical methods that are currently in place for identifying various food allergens. Then, when we look at the aspect of identification, in another angle, you look at traceability. So there are traceability systems that are being used. So even before you start testing in the laboratory, you tend to look at supply chain traceability, where the food source is coming from. So you have to have a good traceability system to know that these sources of food contains allergen. The good part with allergen, let me emphasize, the good part is allergens are required to be labeled. So that's the good part, right? So if you use an allergen as an ingredient, you have to label that. Yeah, so that's the good part. So in during supply chain traceability, it helps to know, okay, we have these raw materials coming from this company, we have these raw materials coming from this place, and these raw materials contain this, or these raw materials are allergens. So we know how to treat them, we know how to store them, we know when to use them, and these are allergen control plans that are being used in various food companies or food industry. So just like, let me say, for instance, if a bakery imports flour that was processed in a facility that also handles malt, that traceability system can flag the risks, and that will prompt precautionary measures to be used to curtail any allergen cross contact that may happen. Okay. All right. Then another way for identification, this basically is more into not the allergen itself, but the allergy as a condition. It's consumer reporting as well. Maybe you have consumers that eat the food and react in a way. So those data are gotten from those consumer reporting, and those gotten from surveillance, from epidemiological data can be used as well to identify allergens that were coming from the food sources. And that can also help regulatory authorities and any other body involved be able to prioritize these allergens for testing and also for labeling. Then we also look at things like allergen risk assessment. So allergen risk assessment, it's really, really important because most regulators and scientists they use tools like the treasure studies to determine the smallest amount of allergen that can cause a reaction. So that's why you see expert committees from the WHO and FAO who sits to discuss on or draft guidelines on allergen risk assessment that can be used in the industry. So these are very important aspects. So these most of the tools that are being developed in any risk assessment, it helps to guide decisions on whether if trace amount is it's dangerous or bad, or what levels can be detected by the laboratory using their methods, and how this labeling can be managed and should be managed. So these are areas when it comes to identification. Yeah, so because of time, I'll be a bit faster. Yeah, because we have other panelists as well. So the other aspect we look into allergen is allergen management. So allergy management is that once we know we what once we know the allergens we're looking at, the next challenge we have in the industry, which is very key for food manufacturers, is allergen cross contact. Allergen cross contact is like an unintentional transfer of a particular allergen into a particular food source not intended to be there. So this can happen in different forms. Allergen cross contact can happen from your purchase supply, can happen from your storage, can happen from using of shared equipment, can happen during production and during formulation and all such. So there's a lot of areas where allergen can get transferred into a food when it's not intended to be there. And the issue with allergen cross contact is because the regulators require you label an allergen when using a food, right? You tend to know, okay, I use this particular food allergen food source in my product formulation, and I know milk is what I use. So I'm going to label milk as part of my ingredients. And anybody allergic to milk will definitely not want to eat that product, right? Which is fine. But the threat is I produce a product that has milk, and in the same company we also produce another product that has, let's say, peanuts or peanut, and because peanut is in our facility, and we tend to purchase that, store that, so there's a possibility that these peanut residues can get transferred to the product formulation you're doing with milk, right? And what makes it worse is if you're using maybe shared equipment, if you don't have an effective cleaning method or strategy, then that can also be a big issue. So when that peanut get transferred into the food product that has milk as an allergen, but because you know you're not using peanut as part of your raw materials or your ingredient, you're not going to label that. So this peanut will be in your food but not being labeled. And that's the threat. Because someone that is allergic to peanut at that point, when looking at the label, he will see milk, oh, I'm not allergic to milk. Then he would not find peanut as part of the labels. And that's where the problem comes into. He eats that food, get a reaction, might be mild, might be very severe. And that's a food safety risk. So that's where we need to get good or very good analytical methods that can also test for all these allergens. So you can see that the recent trend in research when it comes to allergen is multiplexing. So people tend to develop multiplex methods that can detect multiple allergens within a single run. So that can, even though I'm trying to just confirm, okay, milk is in the product, I can also, if I have a multiplex method that has the peanut, that can test for peanut, then I will see it. Once I run an analysis with that, I'm going to see the peanut is present or identify that. So that's where the analytical methods come into play. So let's another aspect for management. It's okay. Then I'll still elaborate on this aspect of um we call it allergen control plans. Yeah, these are part of the hazard analysis and critical control points. So, like here in the US, the Food Safety Modernization Act is an act that requires manufacturers to develop like a food safety plan. And in that food safety plan, they tend to lay out how they identify and evaluate hazards. And these hazards can be anything, can be from food allergy, can be microorganisms and so on. But in the aspect of food allergen, they have to develop a written plan that can identify and also evaluate those allergens. Yeah, so that's why most companies tend to develop an allergen control plan. So those allergen control plan it's a complex cycle that starts with a lot from your allergen identification and also your supply chain management. How do you where do you get your ingredients? How do you receive them? Where you get them, do they also have a good control plan? Do they also label their allergens? And these are issues you also have to monitor when you are setting your supply or your suppliers. If you're evaluating your suppliers, you need to look at their allergen control plan as well. And you also look at, okay, once I get my ingredients, how do I receive them? Where do I store them? Can I can I separate those allergens from the non-allergenic raw materials? How do I separate them? How do I label that? How do I handle these allergen raw materials? Then you also, during production, how do you prevent cross contact? Because this is one of the key issues. Do I use shared equipment or do I dedicate an equipment line for any product that contains an allergen and products that do not contain an allergen? And all this cycle there. And when it comes to labeling, how do I label? Do I have a system for labeling and packaging as well? Because some things we see around is some people, when they don't have a good system for packaging and labeling, they tend to package a particular food in a wrong label. Same food, but because of the variation in ingredients, sometimes they have those mistakes where they just package it in a wrong in a different package, and that could lead to like mislabeling, and that's a very big risk when it comes to consumer protection. Then your hygienic design, how do you clean your system? Do you have a good cleaning protocol? And these are very key issues right now. There are a lot of cleaning protocols that are available. Where how do you clean the equipment? Because if I produce a food that has contains an allergen, and I need to produce another food that do not,
Right. They never give out the
yeah, that do not contain an allergen, how do I clean for the next batch of production? Do I do a dry cleaning? Do I do a wet cleaning? And after cleaning, how do I validate that there's no residue of any allergen left? So these are issues you have to look at. Then there's a lot, and another important part that people tend to forget is training. You need to train your staff. You need to train if you are in a company that deals anything. You just need to train them in aspect of risk assessment, risk management, and any other allergen control plan you have. You need to train them properly because these are the people that are going to be doing that. Okay, so these are basically what we do to manage allergens. Then, lastly, from what another aspect that we're going to look at is labeling, which is the key. I would like it's not really like the most important, but it's very key when it comes to consumer protection, right? So labeling, it's a requirement. There are different types of labeling that are required depending on the country and the regulations they have. We have mandatory labeling laws that are placed, like in the US. There's a group a section of the FDA. They call them the Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act. This act mandates all food manufacturers to that use any food allergen that they've classified. The US classified 9 major food allergens. So they mandate the industry that use any of the 9 major food allergens to label these allergens in their product. So you must label those 9 allergens if you intentionally add them to your product as part. So you can label them as on the ingredient list, or you can have a separate contain statement that just says, okay, contains milk, contains wheat, contains soy or peanut, like that. Or you have them as part of the allergen list. And there are things to that. And it also involves if you use an ingredient that is derived from any allergenic source. For instance, I use cheese. in my production cheese derived from milk, I have to label that cheese. So in my ingredient list, I will have cheese. Then in bracket, you can put milk so that a consumer can directly see milk as an allergen being labeled. So these are some of the requirements. And there are some exceptions when it comes to ingredients. So like, for instance, if you, let's put peanut as an example. Um, Peanut is an allergen which must be labeled. If you produce maybe a peanut oil or a peanut butter, you have to label that. But if you're able to produce a highly refined peanut oil, highly refined, that means almost all the proteins would have been taken out from the oil. So you're only left with the pure fat or pure lipids. Then that exception can apply to you. Then you don't have to label peanut as part of the highly refined peanut oil, okay, because it's not required if it's highly refined. But anything other than that, any ingredient derived from those allergenic sources has to be labeled. And I know, okay, as I mentioned earlier, Nigeria also have their target list of allergens. So we can always see that in some of the NAFDAC guidelines, they do have a guideline on allergen on labeling, which I can always share, or you can find it in the website. It's there. Yeah, when you just look at guidelines for labeling of prepackaged food or packaged food. You're going to find that. Then there are some other labeling requirements. They are not required though. We call them precautionary allergen labeling, PAL. I know maybe you guys have been hearing about PAL. These are precautionary or voluntary labeling. They are not required by law, but what they do is if you have you pro you think you you produce, just like the cross contact thing, you produce a particular food in a company and you produce another food in that same company that has an allergen, and you your food that you're producing does not have an allergen that you don't need to label. But because in that same company you also produce another food that has an allergen, so you need to evaluate. That's where the FISMA, like the Food Safety Modernization Act, comes in play. You need to evaluate your hazard. You need to now see, okay, through my production chain, is there, you need to do a risk assessment and see if there's any chances or any gaps that you may have that this allergen might get transferred to your other food. So after your risk assessment and everything, and you see that with everything you've done, you've tried your best to do the best cleaning and do whatsoever to make sure there's no cross contact, but you still feel there's a gap, then you now what they require is that, okay, you can voluntarily just label that and just say, okay, this food may contain peanut, this food may contain egg, this food may contain, or this food may be is produced in the same facility and produced.
Is that not that you want to give me? Ask me, am I eating ever? See, what? Is it
Sorry,
another thing that is
if you
available?
can mute this.
So why you not asking me? You're asking nonsense questions.
Please mute your mic. Sorry. Chini Agubo, I didn't get your name. Kindly mute your mic. Anubo. CJ Winnie Anubo.
Okay, I think she's muted. Yeah. So these are precautionary
Mr. Jerry, thank you. Our time is past.
Okay.
Kindly
So
roll
I
your
think I
thank
think
you,
I've
sir.
covered everything I wanted to cover. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we're fine. So the only
Okay,
thing
sir.
I'm just going to just say is we need to do more in terms of allergen management, and I think in Nigeria as well we can do a lot. So thank you.
Wow, what a session. People, I hope we took notes. I hope we learned. I hope we understood everything that has to do with food allergy management. It was a very, very expository session. Very, very expository. Thank you, Mr. Jerry. Thank you so, so much. We truly appreciate your time, your inputs, your knowledge, your wealth of experience you've shared with us this evening. Thank you so much. We're grateful. So next on our panelists, the next panelist that will be coming up is Miss Hassan Ibrahim Muna, our water and hygiene expert. A round of applause for her in the chat box, please, people. Thank you. So Miss Hassan Ibrahim Muna is a researcher in water quality and hygiene, and she will explore the science behind safe water use in food processing and handling and its critical role in preventing contamination throughout the food supply chain. You're welcome, Ms. Hassan Ibrahim. Thank you very much. Ma'am, you have 10 minutes.
I'll try to keep it very brief.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'll try to explain very briefly without overcomplicating it. Just the brief fundamentals of how water plays a critical role in food processing and handling. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And as you have well introduced me, I'm a researcher at Cranfield University in water and wastewater management. I'll say that. And so I'll start with how water plays a critical role in food processing and handling. Essentially, to understand how contamination comes about in your food supply system, it's important to know how the water cycle operates. So you do have your water bodies, you do have evaporation and condensation and rain, and then you also have different human activities within your catchment system. So a catchment, for those who are not familiar with the term, just imagine it as your surrounding as a village, but this time the catchment encompasses the water cycle. So in that catchment, there are different activities, industrial, human activities that are all contamination risks to your downstream food supply chain. How? First, you do have your natural sources such as surface flow and underground sources of water. So that can come about from your human activities such as farming and agriculture. There are ways in which different pathogens can enter these sources. So, for instance, surface flow, you do have farming and agriculture, obviously. And with this, there are animals, and everyone, I'm assuming, is familiar on how animals excrete. So when they excrete and there's heavy rainfall, you do have this excretion or these fluids from the animal's gut combining with the soil particles. And with heavy rainfall, that gets washed down into your rivers and streams. But also remember, the rivers and the lakes, they're also sources of irrigation for your farmers. So without proper treatment, there's introduction of that fecal contamination into the farming system. So that's one point of how contamination can come about. Then the second is your underground. So that's imagine wells, abstraction of wells pumping water from underground. Now, if you have your underground water table, which just imagine it's a line beneath the earth, and if it's close to the surface, you have seepage of whatever is going on top, whatever's happening on top, it's trickling down to the bottom. And when that does happen, you get the contamination from the top, it runs down to the bottom. And besides that, you also have risks of chemicals like arsenic and lead and fluorine as well. So these are quite harsh chemicals to the human system, like the skeletal system, and it has also neurological effects if it finds its way into the human body. So those are the main sources, I would say, of how you need to understand how contamination then comes about in food handling and safety. So we've covered that, and then so we move on into the food handling. So those are the sources, and then the food handling is you have your primary production, which is obviously the farmers, how they wash their crops. Remember, they use irrigation, and where they get irrigation, some of them abstract from underground. So they are taking up the chemicals, they're taking up the probably maybe some microbes, depending on how close the water table line is to the surface. And then you do have the secondary treatments of cleaning, food processing, washing your pipes in the factories. So without proper treatment, you can see how it's kind of like a domino effect. So all that's happened from the farmer, from the very first primary producer, it now trickles down. And the reason why you need to have good water quality is that it also ties into regulation. So the regulation bodies, like the World Health Organization and FAO, so they came together and then they proposed the food code, which tells us that you must have water that's potable and clean. Why? Because with the surveys they had done previously, then they found out with poor water quality, you have high risks of infection, like how can I say this, microbial infections into the human body through consumption. So there's risk of E. coli. We are familiar that E. coli can make you diarrhea. You can have kidney and liver failure from it. You also have risks of salmonella entering, and this is all because of the water, the very first primary production of how the fecal material enters with the soil, and then that trickles down into the rivers. Without proper treatment, you have disastrous effects, obviously, with high cases of these diseases breaking out in certain communities. But luckily, you do have treatment. Now, the treatment of water is also very essential. You need to ensure that your treatment processes are effective and they're doing the job. And you need to be testing weekly for mainly E. coli, because that's like the number one health indicator. E. coli and salmonella, I would say. So you do have different treatment processes. So within water drinking, within the drinking treatment, yes, you have different stages. So the first stage is obviously when they're passing it through the drinking water treatment chain. The first stage is removing the large particles. So you have the water from municipal areas going into your treatment centers. So the first point is to remove any large debris, anything that's like leaves, anything that's just large that you can see. They use screens with grids in them to block out. Then you move on to something called coagulation and flocculation. So they dose chemicals inside there, and the reason is that those chemicals will then bind with the tiny particles in the water that weren't captured in the first screening point. So you have those tiny particles. They all come together. They clump up, and they're kind of floating. And then you move on to the third stage, which is sedimentation, where you just let, with gravity, and time, you let those large flocks settle down to the bottom. When it's settled down to the bottom, the water at the top will be more clear. So then you take that to filter it. You're filtering any bacteria that's in there. You're filtering any chemicals. You're using like different filtration systems, like using tiny membranes. So the membranes are, just imagine like a sheet of paper, and there are different pore sizes on that sheet of paper, and only there's a certain level of bacteria that can't pass. So if you use a certain pore size, you know that your bacteria cannot pass through, so it doesn't go into the storage tank, which is essentially the last stage of how the water is stored, then supplied to what we have in our taps. And so that's filtration. And then you go into disinfection. So you do have sometimes a carryover of certain microbes, because there's different microbial organisms with different sizes that can still manage to pass through. So you have your disinfection unit, where you can use chlorine and UV to kind of break down the DNA structures of these microorganisms and essentially kill them. So you have chlorine to kill your E. coli and Salmonella, and then you then store it. So that's the treatment of drinking water. When that's done, then obviously you should be having in the drinking water, they usually test weekly for different chemicals and different microbial parameters, and also testing the pH and the color, because sometimes if you see like dirty, not dirty, but not opaque looking kind of turbid kind of waters, though that's already a sign that there are certain microbes that are attaching to the surfaces of the sediment inside that water. So that's already a risk. So that's also another potential risk of how the microbes can get into your food processing and handling, and how it can enter your food production facilities. So they do weekly testings of this and checking that to ensure that whatever water that is entering the tap, or whatever water that's being passed through the pipes and then going down to your taps, it's clean, it's healthy, and it abides, and most importantly, it abides to the regulations that the World Health Organization has put out, because they didn't just wake up and decide these things. They had disastrous cases that informed them on better practices for proper food safety. Yes, so that's how the story of water enters your food supply system. And also, obviously, there are levels of prevention, such as cleaning. Like if you have a food processing unit or a factory, make sure your pipes are clean, because temperature is the microbes love temperature. Like if it's a moist, warm environment, they will grow, they will play, and then that's how they enter the system. That's how you get contaminated food. Even if you've had good quality water running through your taps, you just have to make sure that your food processing unit or factory is also clean. So ensure not weekly, probably every day. Hot temperature is extremely high temperature is also not favorable for the microbes. They are quite temperature sensitive. So ensure that you're using hot temperature to run through your pipes. Check the pipings. Check the handlers. The people who are handling the food. Hygiene, proper hygiene and sanitation is very, very important. The floors. So there are different ways in which water can act as a media for these microbes and chemicals as well. I hope that has answered what you guys have in mind in terms of water and food safety.
Thank you so much, Mona, for that wonderful section.
Thank you for having me.
It was quite enlightening. And the next on our list, Abubakar is a food safety official at NAFDAC, and he will discuss how science informs risk-based food safety regulations, surveillance systems, and enforcement strategies to protect public health. So, Abubakar, Prof, the floor is open for you.
Good evening, all. My name is Mr. Abubakar Tanimu Umar. It's a pleasure, it's an honor to be speaking with you today. I work with the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, principally in the area of food safety and nutrition. And today I'll be discussing a topic that sits probably at the heart of public health protection and regulatory effectiveness. The topic I've been given is to speak on how science drives risk-based food safety regulations, surveillance, and enforcement strategies. I'm not quite sure 10 minutes will be enough, but I will try because the first speaker spoke for more than, well, let's not go there. I want to begin by saying in a world of increasingly complex food systems, we all know how rapid technological changes and possibly evolving health threats are coming up. You cannot continue doing what you've been doing blindly or reactively. We cannot sit down and say, okay, we have to just keep responding to or waiting until there are food safety incidents before we respond. So you have to think innovatively and find out ways to be able to carry out food safety activities. So we must rely on evidence, and we must also learn to prioritize risk. And you can't prioritize risk without science, which is the backbone of your evidence generation to guide your decision making. So I think the first part of the question is, why do you even need to have food safety or a risk-based food safety regulations? Previously, we say traditional food systems, they tend to have like this concept called one size fits all. So you treat all hazards and all products equally. So this was the previous approach, but evidence has shown that this is neither efficient nor effective. So the reality of today now is that the food safety, the food supply chains are global. A product can be done here in Nigeria and tomorrow you find it in Denmark and all of that. And also you have incidences of, not even incidents, is the norm now. You have highly processed and imported foods. You have threats now, emerging threats like antimicrobial resistance and issue of contaminants. Then also we have challenges of, well, it's not a challenge, but then there are the risks, more or less. That's the reality for today. You have new technologies constantly evolving in production, in the area of storage, and your food distribution. So, what this risk based approach does is that it allows regulators like us in the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration to focus our resources where the greatest threats exist. We can all agree that in Nigeria today, the greatest risks we are having possibly could be from the informal food sector. So it helps, a risk-based approach helps prevent foodborne illnesses, minimize economic losses, and then maintains public trust. Then why do we need the science itself? The data we generate from science, we know it helps us to identify which hazards are most dangerous and also identify possibly who is most at risks. Is it infants? Is it pregnant women? Is it people who are immunocompromised? Then also study the critical control points, then intervene and at each of these critical control points. So on this, I will just conclude by saying, not conclude generally, but then on the risk-based approach, I will say that it is not just a best practice. Currently, it is a global standard that you find promoted by all the global regulatory bodies, by the global standard setters like Codex Alimentarius, like your WHO and the Food and Agriculture Organization. So the second part now for me is what is the role of science now in food regulation? First and key role of science is to identify these hazards. It's the foundation of regulation. We must employ the use of scientific studies and surveillance to identify hazards, biological hazards, your bacteria, your viruses, and your parasites. Then chemical hazards such as your mycotoxins, food additives, and pesticide residues. Then, in terms of physical hazards, debris, metal fragments, glasses, stones, etc. So, when you are trying to do a risk assessment, it allows us to define. That's when you want to do a quantitative risk assessment, because that also applies where you now have to now determine issues like maximum residue limits, tolerable upper intake levels. So, in the area of standard assessments, you have scientific committees. Mostly in Nigeria now, we have the Standards Organization of Nigeria through a committee, or I'm sure we've all heard of Nigerian Industrial Standards. So we have committees who sit down to review toxicological, nutritional, and epidemiological evidence, so that we'll now be able to set limits, food limits, also set fortification levels for food, then also approve or reject any food additives, because these things are, I'm sure we have heard of color dyes in palm oils and all of that, Sudan dyes. So these committees are where these contaminants or possible contaminants or additives are now reviewed to see, okay, based on evidence, science-based evidence, or science or data generated from science, are they accepted or rejected? Then also to now guide the design of mandatory labeling requirements. It's very critical for us to know that in Nigeria, NAFDAC is responsible for guiding the labeling benchmarks or labeling requirements for all categories of packaged food, drug, and other regulated products. So, thirdly, I would say now, how do we now ensure that surveillance systems are driven by science? We say, according to us regulators, we know that surveillance is like the eyes and the ears of our own food control system. The science basically is to determine what to look for, where to look for, and how do we look for, or let's say the frequency of how. So our monitoring programs mostly in NAFDAC and all other food, what do you call them, FDAs, you have routine food sampling at markets. We go into the markets, we pick up these food items, then sample them and take them to our lab. And the next step is the laboratory analysis. We employ the use of all these novel technologies, your spectroscopy, the chromatography, PCR, polymerase chain reaction, all this. And then you now carry out market surveys also. I was saying that rather than we just say we want to sample randomly, you now begin to look at foods that are classed as high risk food categories. We all agree that foods such as raw milk, possibly smoked fish, and even spices could classify as high risk depending on how you look at them. Then products that are coming directly from informal markets or vulnerable regions are also classified as high risk products. You have reports where we do inspections. We gather reports from various FBOs. Sorry, FBOs mean food business operators. We try to class them according to a number of recurring violations. So if you are a serial violator, you know that you're meant to be classed as a high risk violator. So if your previous history has shown that you have always complied with regulations, GMP assessments, and everything has been moving smoothly, then of course you are classed as a low risk food business operator. So currently now we are now beginning to see that, okay, we have integration of this data using digital tools. I'm sure for those of us who have come into contact with NAFDAC, we've seen that we have live and running websites where you could directly verify product integrity. You could verify your numbers. You could also verify information about these products. You can visualize results in real time. For drugs also, you could also check, and we have what we call a green book, NAFDAC green book, where you can also verify all of this. Then also this information also where you can now even on these platforms you can report, and these reports can lead to emergency responses such as recalls or even bans for violators. So the next point is on enforcement strategies informed by scientific evidence. All enforcement activities we carry out are intended to be proportionate, fair, and guided by science. We carry out targeted inspections to ensure that rather than we spread out inspectors thinly, science helps us to target facilities with previous violations, as I've mentioned before. Where you have products that have been linked to foodborne outbreaks, naturally we expect our attentions to be focused on such. Then, wherever there are regions where historically you begin to have identified food frauds or adulterations, these are also classed as high risk. Then, when we want to go further, because it's not all about surveillance and enforcement, the next step mostly is about prosecution. Where I found a violator, you found him with science. So how do you now keep forward? So prosecution, modern enforcement relies on analytical results so that we now substantiate the penalties to justify recalls and also to provide legal evidence that can withstand scrutiny. Because in my capacity as a regulator, I can confidently tell you I've been summoned to court so many times to speak on adulterants, for instance, in alcohol, or where you have a producer or any erring violator telling you that insisting he's doing the right thing, then you now have to now go to the legal section to be able to ensure prosecution, for instance. So then you have rapid response systems through platforms like InfoSan, International Food Safety Network. You have recall. We also have notices. We have what we call rapid alert systems for food and feeds. These are live platforms where we exchange information, also exchange information about risk scoring and classification systems. Our risk scoring system tries to align in Nigeria, for instance, tries to align to the European classification so that I'm sure we've heard about rejection of agricultural produces in countries. So if you don't comply with such regulations in these countries, your foods and feeds are automatically more or less banned. So you have to have an information sharing network to carry out that clearly spells out risk scoring, coordinated alerts between agencies and ports of entries. Then you also have public advisories or withdrawals to reduce exposure. So science also, with evolving science, though we can't go into this because it's just a whole new, we can go into a part of it. We know that there is a modern concept NAFDAC is already adopting for the pharmaceutical sector called pharmaceutical traceability. We are making the use of blockchain technology to be able to rapidly trace not only high risk, all categories of risk or products with risk. So this is also being replicated by NAFDAC for the food sector, where we are trying to now use blockchain technology to be able to identify and isolate contaminated batches across supply chain so that we can improve the trust and transparency of our consumers. In conclusion, I would say that science is not even optional. It is mandatory, it is foundational, and it is very critical to a modern, responsive food safety system. Risk-based regulation, science-driven surveillance, and evidence-informed enforcement are the only way we can keep pace with evolving threats and expectations. So to truly trust or protect public health, we must continue to invest in laboratory infrastructure, skilled professionals, then foster collaboration across all the value chains, your health, your agriculture, and trade sectors. Then you also have to embrace innovation and technology. I'm just giving a summary now of then also all decisions you're taking as a result of identified violations have to be rooted in scientific evidence. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abubakar. Thank you for your session. Thank you. We really learned a lot. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Please, guys, you can send in your questions for any of the panelists. Send them in. Drop it in the chat box. They will be very willing to answer your questions and give more light wherever you don't understand more. Thank you, Mr. Abubakar, once again. Lastly, last but not the least panelist for tonight is no other person but Miss Christabel Ayi, and she's a food scientist with expertise in consumer safety, and she'll be discussing on how food safety supports healthier communities and the importance of consumer education in reducing foodborne risk. Please, people, a round of applause as usual in the chat box as we welcome Christabel. Miss Christabel, you have the floor.
Yeah.
10 minutes.
Good evening, everyone. So today I'll be presenting on how food safety supports healthier communities and the importance of consumer education in foodborne risks. So food safety is a critical aspect of public health, and its importance cannot be overstated. So we know about foodborne illnesses and how severe its consequences. So the impact of foodborne illnesses. So the first one is a global burden. According to the World Health Organization, an estimation of 600 million people fall ill from foodborne diseases every year, resulting in 420,000 deaths. However, these figures are like underreported in most cases because not everyone goes to the hospital when they are facing issues of food, they are facing foodborne sicknesses and all that stuff. Some people may trivialize certain symptoms thinking they can recover on their own, whilst others may experience severe consequences. Next slide, please. So there's also the economic burden of foodborne illnesses, in the sense that there can be some higher significant economic impacts on individuals, families, communities. For example, let's talk about the medical expenses that people have to pay in cases of foodborne illnesses, which could have been avoided, loss of productivity. So imagine you're in a company where there's an issue of foodborne contamination in your canteen or something. It can affect the productivity if most people don't report to work, and reduce quality of life in the cases where it leads to serious complications. Can all be so. Some of these things can be long-term health consequences that can affect the livelihood of persons who face such situations. So the economic burden can be substantial, and it's essential to take steps to prevent these foodborne illnesses. So to the vulnerable population, foodborne illnesses affects people based on though everyone is prone to, please next slide, though everyone is prone to the exposure of foodborne illnesses, there are some people who are more exposed, who are more vulnerable. So these people are children, pregnant women, and older adults. These people are more susceptible to foodborne illnesses. For instance, children under 5 years of age are at a higher risk of contracting foodborne illnesses due to their developing immune system. Pregnant women are also more vulnerable, and it can lead to complications, even affects the fetus, as well as older people too. So how food safety supports healthier communities. So we'll talk about 3 aspects here: prevention of foodborne illnesses. So food safety practices can prevent foodborne illnesses by reducing the risks of contamination and ensuring the food is handled, stored, and cooked safely. Think of it like domino effects, where one small mistake in food handling can lead to a chain of reactions, of consequences. As I mentioned earlier, medical bills, affects the quality of life, and even can affect the vulnerable people, as I mentioned earlier. So promoting public health. Food safety is crucial and is critical in promoting public health by preventing the spread of diseases and reducing the risks of foodborne illnesses. When we prioritize food safety, we are not just protecting ourselves, we are also protecting our loved ones and communities. So whenever we are cooking at home, we should always ensure that we take the steps to ensure that our food is safe. As we all know, food safety is not one person's business. It's not the sole responsibility of the food industry or something. Everyone has a role to play from farm to fork. In your kitchen, you also have a role to play in ensuring that food is safe and your loved ones are also saved from all these foodborne illnesses. Another way food safety supports healthier communities is supporting economic development. So food safety can also support economic development by increasing consumer confidence in the food supply chain and promoting trade. So an example I'll give is, so like in the food industry, when foods are produced, I believe consumers have the trust that the food that is produced is safe. Imagine you buy a product like packaged, a finished product here. You don't tend to examine the safety, be cautious of whether it's safe to eat or not, because you trust that this industry has implemented the right safety measures and is safe to eat. So all this can support economic development. In the case of even ready to eat foods, like in some countries like the European countries and stuff, they are ready to eat rice that you can just microwave, salads. So there's that confidence in the food industry, the company, that okay, so this food is safe. So he or she just buys the food, warms it up and everything and just eats. So all this help in supporting economic development. So the importance of consumer education. So consumer education empowers consumers, because consumer education helps the consumer to make informed choices about food safety and reduce the risks of foodborne illnesses. So as our brother spoke about the issue of food allergens and stuff, when consumers are aware of issues or how food allergen issues can arise, they know how to look out for certain things. So in the food label, he made mention of an example of the cheese and all that stuff. So a consumer can know that so if I have an allergen and I'm going to buy a product, even if it contains cheese or something, I have to be sure, because there could be some plant-based products which are used for cheese. So I have to be sure and know that, okay, this is milk, so I have to stay away from it. So when a consumer is educated in that regard, he or she can make informed choices. So another is safe food handling practices. So a consumer can learn safe food handling practices such as proper storage, cooking, refrigeration, and also all of which can help reduce foodborne illnesses. So most people would think that this is not a big deal, but it will surprise you to know that there are some people who don't know key things. Maybe someone will buy meat, fresh meat, and put it in the refrigerator, which has a temperature of like 4 degrees Celsius or something, depending on how efficient the refrigerator is. But education of the consumer can even prompt the person to know that, okay, when I buy fresh produce like this, which can spoil early, I have to put it in the freezer. If I'm about to use such a product, I don't have to remove it. If I want to cook in the evening, I don't have to remove this meat or chicken or whatever and thaw it like the whole day, because during that process, microbial growth can occur. I have to thaw it rapidly and use it rapidly. So all these things can help in ensuring food safety. So you have to also recognize food safety risks. So consumers should be educated on certain risks. Like when you buy a canned product, you should know that, okay, if it has a bruise or it has a dent or something, there could be a risk, because when there's a dent, it's possible that air has entered, which can trigger microbial growth, and the food may not be safe. So all these things are important. So as I've said earlier, but I just want to re-emphasize is that the best practices for consumers, such as handling food safely by by staying informed. Information is very key, because sometimes if you don't know certain things, you may be found wanting, yeah. And report food safety concerns. So let me give an example. There was this time, okay, in Ghana, I'm a Ghanaian actually, so I'm going to give this example. There was this time during it, I think a year ago or something, and there was this spice that was being sold for cheap. Like, it was quite affordable. I don't know whether it was a promotion or something, but I just saw it on the news, not knowing this product was expired like several years ago. But the people who were buying it did not check. They were using it. Everyone was using it. So you can just imagine during that time, if you ate Salah food, it's possible that you consume that product one way or the other, because most people bought it. It just took one person to report that situation. And I'm sure that product was even imported into the country illegally or something, because I don't even know how that happened. So yeah, we have to report food safety concerns. When you see anything, you have to report, because you may not be the one to consume it, but someone, your loved one, or someone who is vulnerable, someone who cannot read, may consume that, and it will be a problem. So in conclusion, food safety is critical, supporting healthier communities, and consumer education plays a vital role in reducing foodborne risks. By understanding food safety practices, recognizing food safety risks, and staying informed, consumers can significantly reduce their risks of foodborne illnesses. Let's work together to promote food safety and support healthier communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Christabel. Thank you very much. People, please, we can say thank you to her via the chat box as well. And appreciate her for her time. We really appreciate you for your time and the effort. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. So thank you. We've come to the end of our panel session and discussion, and be taking questions now. We'll be taking questions from people. We have a couple of questions from the chat box. And I think the first one is directed. We have two questions rather for one question first for Miss Muna, and it says, my question goes thus: how do you convince the management that there's a need for test kits to be bought for testing treated water that are produced for sale? Hi, Miss Muna, are you still on the call? Okay, so you have a question here, and the question is, how do you convince the management that there's a need for test kits to be bought for testing treated water that are produced for sale? And that is the first question. The second question is, what are the expected tests needed to carry out to certify that the produced water is safe for sales? These are the questions you have. Oh, sorry. She says her microphone isn't unmuting. Okay, probably it's a technical issue. Okay, while we're still sorting out Miss Muna, Mr. Abubakar, you have a question as well. You have a question. Hi, Mr. Abubakar. Are you still on the call?
Yes, I'm still on the call.
Okay, thank you. So the question says, how does NAFDAC identify expired certificates and registration? It also says, what are the processes in place to ensure proper documentation? Don't know if you got that. It says, how does NAFDAC identify expired certificates and registration? What are the processes in place to ensure proper documentation? Thank you.
Okay, so I want to respond by asking the person who just posted the question. Are you interested in knowing how NAFDAC identifies, or how you can identify? Because there are two different things. If you as a consumer wants to identify expired certificates or verify the registration status of products, what you're supposed to do is hello?
He says how NAFDAC. Yeah, he says he specified now that how NAFDAC
identifies.
How NAFDAC identifies.
Okay.
Yes.
So for us, we are trying to digitize, or rather, we've digitized our process by having an online database where we have a central number production registry. So any product with a certified NAFDAC number is captured on that database. So during routine inspections, during scheduled or even unannounced inspections, and where we now encounter challenges with faking probably or falsifying NAFDAC numbers and all of that, or to even note if the numbers are expired, we go into this database, then run a search, and then all details pop up. You get information about the registration status of, or even the claims that, okay, this product is registered. You get information about the expiry date for the expiry date of the license. You get information about if the product itself is even registered from the very offset. Then for a consumer now, because sorry, I have to add this as it will guide us to be able to be watchdogs in our own rights. You can easily log on to the NAFDAC website, registration.nafdac.gov.ng. Sorry, I'll post that later. Then when you click on it, it opens. Just scroll down, you see a place where you'd see verify product. So where you see verify products, type in the registration number in full, for instance. Do not put any spaces or hash. You see A1 dash 4-digit number. If there is an L, make sure you add it to the number there. Then click. It pops up all the information you need about the registration status of the product. For drugs, it's a slightly different system. We have what we call the NAFDAC Green Book. A simple Google search will be able to show you that. You can easily go into the website. You can also download the apps. It's available on your Apple App Store and your Play Store for Google phone users. Download the Green Book, and then you'll be able to verify. Even by a name search, you can verify by using the NAFDAC number. You can verify by a lot of search parameters for that. Then the second question is, what are the processes in place to ensure proper documentation? This is also a wide question that I don't seem to understand. Proper documentation, is it for GMP purposes, or is it proper documentation with regards to the NAFDAC registration number? I think I've answered that already.
Okay. The person that asked the question, Mr. Destiny, I believe this answers your question. Thank you. And Mr. Abubakar, 1 second. Another person still asked the question, even though we okay, let me still throw it to you as well. She says, how can one become a certified food safety and quality specialist after obtaining a food science master degree and in technology? I really don't understand myself. It says,
Yeah, I think
how can
I have an idea of what she's asking, or what he's asking.
okay. Thank you.
So, not until last year or last 2 years, there's a new body in town, a new regulator to handle the certification of food safety professionals. I don't know if we've heard of the Nigerian Council of Food Science and Technology. Their primary mandate is to ensure, or rather to streamline and also to like harmonize all the activities of this food safety scientists. They are also, amongst other mandates, they are responsible for registering and licensing and certification of all food scientists operating within Nigeria. Within Nigeria now, you are not a certified food scientist if you don't have what we call a CFSN number. So if you want to know how to go about it, just go online, search for this acronym. I will also post the website, NICFOST, Nick First. Then you go to their website, you see the registration page for the certification of a food safety professionals. You're supposed to primarily, I think the key requirements for you is to be a member of the Institute of Food Science and Technology. Then also, by way of association or study, make sure you are primarily aligned to food safety and nutrition work. Then you can now apply, and then if you are found worthy of being issued the certificate, your certificate will be delivered to your doorstep. I think after payment of probably a certain fee, but it's not. It's negligible as far as I'm concerned. But that body is responsible for regulating the practice of all certified food scientists in Nigeria. So I'll post the NAFDAC website, and I'll also post the NICFOST website for you to be able to do that too. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Abubakar. I believe this answers her question as well, or his question. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hi, Muna. Thank you. You're back on
Yeah,
the
sorry.
phone.
Yeah, so I managed to do the settings on my phone. So yes, so the two questions, there are two different parts. So one is
Yes.
the drinking drinking water testing and how is that done, and then the other is the kind of the parameters that they test for and so on. So the the testing is not from food. I don't do food processing, but what I know is the testing is done by the water company itself. So the water company will have either in the field they'll have like really easy to do testing like a pH test or a strip test. Usually it's like how you just it's like a if anyone can, like, if you just go back to memory and like remember how you put a pH strip test in your beaker, and then a certain color comes out, and then that color can either tell you if it's acidic or alkaline. So there are different test strips for different chemicals. So there's that, and then there's a testing that's now done in depth that's usually sent to either a research organization or a university, because most often than not, those are the two organizations that will have the equipment to really do an in-depth test for the standard that you want, or in like you need in-depth knowledge of. And then the second is the standards that they test so there are different categories. So you have your microbial standards, like that's the E. coli, the salmonella, the norovirus, and then you have your chemical parameters, which essentially those are your chemical compounds, chlorine, lead, nitrates, and then you also have the physical, which is pH, turbidity, taste, and odor. So those are the parameters that they test for, and that is all in line with regulation. So the drinking water standards will, from knowledge I know, the one in the UK currently, the water company cannot supply water if it does not meet the regulations. So to begin with, the water will not come to your tap if it has not met the standards that the regulations have. And that's why they do this weekly testing to make sure is there anything that's changing, because you remember you have that catchment that will affect how your treatment is. So you have your catchment activities going down to your treatment configuration. So they do a weekly test, because the way you can be in a community every time things are changing, there's rain, there's no rain, there's farming, there's no farming, mixed farming, no mixed farming. So things like that affect your water bodies. So they do a weekly test of those. So yeah, the testing, maybe, I'm not sure of this, but maybe the food factories have their own kind of testing as well, just for safety. But the water company always has to do the testing. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. I hope whoever asked this question has an answer. Mrs. Toyin, rather. I hope your question has been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Muna. Thank you. So any other questions, you can drop it in the chat box. Okay.
Sorry, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So this question, thank you, Mr. Bubakar. Thank you, all the speakers. So they're really done a lot of job here. So I have a question regarding GMOs, introduction of GMOs food to Africa, especially Nigeria. There are a lot of it has bring controversy ever since Nigeria said they will be bringing them to the country. So I want to know what regulatory measures are currently in place in assessing the safety of GMOs before they enter into our food system in the country.
You asked about how GMO is being regulated in the country. If you are very conversant with the news, I'm sure you must have heard of an incident where NAFDAC had one or two regulatory overlaps with the Nigerian Biosafety Management Agency. The I think by their mandate they are responsible for undertaking research to properly identify issues of genetic modified organisms and also alert the public. But then NAFDAC, as the chief food safety regulator, possibly went ahead to announce or even tag. It was really controversial if you've been listening to the news. So currently the situation is that both NAFDAC and the NBMA have what we call a memorandum of understanding between both of them, and through meetings and collaborations, how to regulate GMOs is one of the key discussion points amongst the committees. So, and this new guidelines will soon be developed, new regulations will soon be developed, and I'm sure you'll hear most of this before the end of this year. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, please.
Thank you,
So,
Mr.
but in
Abubakar. I hope
addition,
that answers your question.
yeah,
Okay.
in addition, Mr. Walker, they need to know, is there any product that has been approved currently? Because these are other issues we have to look at.
Yes.
Is
Yes,
there any GMO that has been approved? Like,
the misinformation is actually unnecessary. The truth is, there are no GMOs. Once your products are known as genetically, it needs to be researched and researched on. And as I've told you, this is a process in development, and expect to hear news soon. Currently, NAFDAC is not issuing licenses for any genetically modified organisms.
okay, but another angle we need to look at: how do we really identify these GMOs? Like, really,
Yes.
like
So
it's
capacity
not just about the
building,
safe.
research,
Because
exactly.
if you presume safety checks, you look at
Yes,
testing the test for, let's say, stores or analytes that we are well aware of.
yes,
But how do we
yes.
really differentiate these foods are genetically modified?
So the key to that is, first of all, we need to have training, exposure to what do you call them, analytes, exposure to equipment, and then when you have a core team that is competent to test, or you have possibly a GMO lab in the country. I think this is outside the context of our discussion, but then just to make it clear that with the development of these guidelines, and I'm still reverting back to that where you have policies set, then all the other activities that are geared around it would naturally come up.
Okay.
Thank you very
But
much.
right now in the country, we have those that are in circulation in the market, not in the market because you can't just go to market and buy any GMO
Yes,
crop.
yes.
We have the what is it called again? Orange corn, right?
Yeah.
Fleshy orange.
Orange corn. We have the cowpea,
Yes.
and which other one? I think there are three we have in the country right now.
But the
Yes.
orange, okay. Is it the orange corn you talked about? Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah,
depends.
the
So
orange corn.
Yeah, we need to also
If you call it
maybe
orange corn, Prof,
yeah
there's a
biofortification
line between biofortification
and
and
GMOs. Yeah.
genetic modification. You understand? So the orange fleshy corn or whatever you're calling,
Is
they
bio
are
is
they are
biomodified.
biofortified exactly. So
Yeah,
those
they are
products are safe.
biofortified.
Okay.
Biofortified, you are deliberately including
Enhance.
or enhancing the nutrients from the
Mm.
growth phase. You understand? So
Mm.
that
Mm-hmm.
is that is quite different from your
Genetically
genetic
modified.
modification exactly. So
Okay.
it's a fully different this thing. Thank you.
So I
But
think
something we should understand is that genetically modified crops are not something you walk to the market and buy, right?
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
because
yes,
Yes,
please.
yes, yes.
basically we are supposed to create labeling requirement for that as well, because
Exactly,
yeah, you
exactly.
have to
For
label
their
when you have
products.
GMOs, you have to label them. Then secondly, we need to develop risk assessment tools for that. Like we need to do proper like a guideline for risk assessment, because this is the only way I feel we can really evaluate the safety risks that comes with GMO. So different countries develop different risk assessment. So you have to, if you can look at the US risk assessment on GMOs, you're going to see some informations there. Yeah. So I think that's one thing we need to do in Nigeria as well.
Mm.
If we really want to maybe bring up GMOs into the country. But as of now, I think there's no GMO that has been approved by NAFDAC. So
By NAFDAC, okay. That's good. Thank you. I think
okay.
Jerry, I have a question for you.
Okay.
I want to know if there are and it's about allergens and allergies, yeah.
Mm.
If there are laboratory tests that one can undergo even in the hospital, the ones that are available in Nigeria right now, to ascertain whether they have a particular allergy.
Oh, yeah. So mostly the food allergen test, right?
Food allergen, yeah. Let's say that I ate a food that contains quite a number of allergens. And I'll give an example like peanuts, and it also contains, okay, let me just say that I had a snack, Gary, and I had peanuts and I had milk in it. And at the end of the day, I started having an allergic reaction, which I don't know which it is. So my question is, getting to the hospital, are there tests available that one can take to say, okay, it's actually an allergy, but
Yeah.
which of the allergens am I reacting to? Which of the foods am I allergic to?
Yeah. Yeah. So there are clinical tests for food allergy from any individual that has been affected. So
Okay.
normally, if you are first thing again, if you consume a food and react to that, there are many factors that can make you react to a food. So, but one of the first tests we don't. That's not part of a clinical test. That's an observational test that you need to know if this can be or may be, let me use that word, a true
Mm.
allergy. Is any
Okay.
true allergy, the onset of that reaction has to be very short, basically within 3 to 10 minutes. If you don't
Mm.
react within 3 to 10 minutes in that time range, most likely it's not a food allergy stuff. It's not true allergy. And secondly, there are specific symptoms you need to look at. One of the major ones people see is hives. When you have hives on the skin, you have swollen of the throat and some other inflammation. You understand, itching and the rest. These are some clinical symptoms that might denote food allergy. So once you have those reactions, and if you're giving after then, if you're giving any antihistamine and the symptoms subsides, then it's also an indication of a true allergy, but that's not a definite test. So after then, you can do some clinical tests. So there are various clinical tests that can be done in hospitals. One of the major one they do the oral food challenge. The oral food challenge is basically they give you this allergen they're suspecting you to be allergic to. They give you in small proportions So they do it by increasing the dose. So they give a very, very small dose, or let me use the word concentration as well. Yeah. So they give you that, then increase it bit by bit and see the level at which you react. So it might get to there's a maximum level that has been placed. If you don't react at that level, then they might just say you're not allergic to that. Yeah. So but they now try to see at different doses when do you react or if you react. So this is one of the tests. They also use the skin prick test where you can read more about the skin prick test. They can do it on your hand. So there's a way they just design that. Take a dose of the allergen, prick the skin, then they like touch that to your blood and see if that, or just use that and just get the allergen, then prick it into your skin. So if there's an inflammation that comes or a swelling that comes out from at that spot, sorry, then that's an indication of an allergy to that food. So these are tests. There are other blood tests that can be done, like the IgE blood tests. These are specific. So they do specific IgE blood tests, which those ones you can read. That's very it's quite expensive. So there are various clinical tests that can be done, but I don't know. I'm not sure if those are being done back here in Nigeria. But I believe there are hospitals that do that in Nigeria. But I don't know to what extent and what kind of test they perform.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I want to make a comment for the person that was asking that she has a master's in food science and how do they obtain a certification, if I can still see the question. From what Mr. Abubakar had explained, that is something that will give you a license to practice as a food scientist in Nigeria. However, it is different from certification. So for you to obtain certifications in food safety and quality, as a food safety and quality specialist, you have to obtain a certification courses. There are some of them that are available, like we have the FSSC 22000, we have the ISO 22000, and there are organizations in Nigeria that offer such. I think one of them is SGS or something that offers such certification. It's just for you to look up for them, and it has a validity, more like from so year to so year, which means you need to keep renewing that. But for you to be a licensed food scientist in Nigeria, the link that Mr. Abubakar shared, you have to pass through that link with Nick first to do that. I don't know if the person that asked the question is still here. I just wanted to add to what Abubakar said.
And in addition, I don't know, it's also always important to develop a niche in food safety. There are some people I have interacted with, they want to do everything. Like sometimes it's impossible. Just pick up a niche in food safety, then everything will be targeted towards.
What's that noise?
Sorry, I have a question that I want to ask Mr. Jerry.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to know the status of erythrocin red as a food colorant, if it's still acceptable, because I heard there's a lot of controversy concerning it being carcinogenic. Then, based on my recent research, I discovered the FDA said it's still acceptable till 2026 in food and 2027 in drugs. So I just want to know the current status of erythrocin red as food colorants.
Okay. I think if you can repeat the word you said, erythrocin red.
Yes, erythrocin red.
Okay, I'm not too
Can I
concerned.
come in?
Yeah, colorants. Maybe Abu
I
with
think
like that.
E30 or something, Abi.
Yeah,
Yes, maybe I should come in here.
yeah, Abu should be able to do that.
Yes, so the dye you are referring to is they call it FD&C red number 3. It's
Yes.
actually, yeah, it's actually a popular discussion currently ongoing because the FDA has already said it's a possible carcinogen. Then, because of its rampant use, they've come out to say that it will take effect from a certain date. Do you understand? So these are all commercial interests at play currently. So in Nigeria, we are also guided by the global community and whatever decision that has been taken. As soon as that is confirmed, not only by the FDA, research is already ongoing. We have what we call, I've told you about the International Food Safety Network. We have what we call rapid alert system. So once this is confirmed, information officially feeds into the NAFDAC. Okay, officially take action. You understand? Or even on our own. The problem we are having in Nigeria is we are limited when it comes to actually carrying out research. So it's a case of relying on evidence, global evidence, to now take action. So once this is confirmed that FDA has given an order and all of that, expect to see immediate statements, or what do you call it, regulatory directives to the telling us, okay, clearly that we should stop the use of erythrocin. So as it is now, I know that manufacturers in the US have until 2027, that's January 15th, 2027, and January 15th, 2028. If you check it, you're going to see the regulatory directive issued by FDA to all manufacturers before they can be able to officially withdraw and now say that they've stopped the use of it. But currently, not yet. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So I have a question. I don't know if Miss Christabel is still here.
Hello, yeah, please, I'm here.
Okay, so I have a question for you. More like, we know there are, I would say, an avalanche of information in the internet when it comes to food, nutrition, and the rest of it. And as consumers, most times the easiest way or our first point of contact to get information as regard to what best for us to eat is actually the internet. So is there a particular, just not to be misled, you understand? Because most of those information, there are some of them that are kind of misleading. So is there a as in maybe particular journal or maybe site that you might advise us? How do you advise us to seek our information from the internet? You understand? At least to get the right thing to do.
Yeah, I understand the question. But for this, I'll say it's quite complicated looking at the fact that not all consumers are like book literate, like able to read and all that stuff. But let me give an example. So in Ghana, the FDA, there is a site where you can check out those things, maybe foods that are acceptable, that are food that are acceptable, that are also FDA approved and all that stuff. But however, not everyone has access to those websites. Not everyone is knowledgeable about those things. So regarding the fact that there's an avalanche of information, sometimes I see people post TikToks of maybe you can eat this and this to do this, you can do this product, you can do this product, and most people have TikToks now. So I think though such things are not there, moving forward, maybe some of these governmental food bodies can also use different mediums which is more accessible to the general public to be able to send out such informations, because currently it's just restricted to people who are aware of it. Because if you are not really in the food safety field or you're not a researcher or something, you may not be aware of such sites where you can get valid information about certain products. So I've not completely answered the question, but it's actually an issue that should be addressed.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Much, everyone. The questions have been coming in, and thankfully, we've been getting valued answers to every of them. So I saw one question. I don't know if it's a question or just a comment in the chat box, and it's from Sheila Dinis. And she says, good night, dear. It's a pleasure meeting with you. I'm a Mozambican student, and I would love to know, or rather, I'd like to know how can our countries, universities, and researchers collaborate in developing affordable nutritional supplements for vulnerable populations in Nigeria. Sheila, I believe you're still on the call, so this is a question, and probably Mr. Jerry, you should. This is in your niche. You should probably help us answer. Thank you. This will be our last question for the day.
Okay. The question is quite tricky because in times when you're trying to collaborate, it's a long game, right? So basically, though, for me, I believe when we are looking at the context of nutritional supplements, there's a lot to be done there because in what aspect of supplementation are we trying to focus on? But there's a lot of research to be done in that aspect too. But to cut across Africa, because if we're going to collaborate within countries, then one of the best approach I believe we need to do is to establish like a regional research center. So if you have a regional research center, that helps each of the countries to really be involved. But those things are not just easy because it has to be a governmental approach. Like the government has to be involved. There's a lot of money to be put in and the rest. But so when you talk about research within countries, so that's the first thing that comes to my mind, a regional center. Yeah, which I know in Europe they do have such kind of centers that are like a regional center where most countries fund, they seek grants, they do a lot to get money involved for research that cut across the continent or within a particular region of the continent. So that's an area we can maybe look at. I don't know if there is any such regional research center in Africa that a lot of countries have been involved with, but it has to be a government stuff, a government thing to do. Yeah, because it will cost a lot. And for nutritional supplements, we we can look towards African ingredients, underutilized crops, and see what can become up because there's a lot of research going on, people looking at different components, different compounds, and how do we get these compounds of biological value and how do we purify them, how do we make them into supplements, and how do we test them in terms of safety assessment and ensure there's nothing that we don't have any safety risks coming from this. And I know there's a lot to be done, but first of all, the collaboration has to be a governmental stuff. So it's a big deal. That's why I said initially it's quite tricky. So I don't know if anybody has any other thing to say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jerry. Sheila, I believe you got answers to your question. Thank you. Wow, it's been a very, very, very eventful night and very value-packed session. I sincerely want to appreciate all our panelists and also you who has been here with us from the beginning. Thank you for your time, the engagement and all of that. We truly appreciate it. And in closing, we would love to say that you everything that was spoken today is really important because it helps to broaden our horizon on the things we do not know or haven't heard about food safety and the different topics that were handled today. So I'd still like us to have other at the back of our minds, still do more work, even though we came here to learn, even though we are in attendance, because we have other things like we really want to learn, relearn and unlearn. It's still important for us to keep propagating the message of food safety, because it doesn't just end with this session. It continues. It's a continual effort to ensure that from our farms tables to our tables, food is properly safe for feeding. On that note, I would like to say thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you to all the participants. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you for having us. And by the special grace of God, the summary of the meeting will be shared by the grace of God on the platform. For those that are on the platform and those that are not on the platform, you will still get it somehow. And can call it a night. Thank you so much for being here. We truly appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I believe you got value, of course, because these things, the value I personally received today, money cannot buy it, honestly. I won't lie. So I'm really grateful, and I want to appreciate everyone for being here with us. Thank you, Miss Muna. Thank you, Mr. Jerry. Thank you, Mr. Abubakar. Thank you, Miss Christabel. Thank you very much for your time. I truly appreciate it. Thank you, Miss Immaculate, for having us. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. And this is just the beginning of our town halls with the expert. Just expect more from us. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Bye.